Hello to you all. My name is Andrew Chung, artistic producer of London Symphonia, and I'm delighted to have our principal clarinetist, Graham Lord, with us today. Hello, Graham.
Hey there, Andrew. Hello, everyone.
So we are chatting just to get a little bit of a musical angle ahead of our concert, The Life and Troubled Times of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. And we'll be speaking with our narrator slash writer slash actor, Roy Lewis, very shortly. So Graham, this concert, it's part historical fiction, part rediscovery of music that's been largely forgotten. You came to me with the idea of performing this nonette, a very substantial work by Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. And coincidentally, I'd also been thinking about this same piece. Do you recall?
Yeah, I sure do. It was a very strange time for all of us, I believe, because as I recall it, the genesis of this concert kind of came out of us, London Symphonia, performing the Beethoven Septet, and I'm pretty sure that was like in the fall of 2020, I think. And when we were able to, still putting on concerts. Obviously, in those times, without a live audience, but we were streaming, doing what we could. And one of those that we did was the Beethoven Septet. And even though those were the times of those plexiglass
Oh,
boxes and everything, it was really quite an experience. It still went really well. I remember being a successful concert in spite of all the circumstances. And we felt, I think, a really great sense of accomplishment after that. And we all sort of met afterwards, the musicians, and said, doing these sort of chamber pieces, but larger scale ones, would be a really great thing for us to do as an ensemble. And we were sort of brainstorming on doing other pieces. And I know the Schubert octet certainly came up as a possibility. And, we're going to play a little bit of that on this program too. But also, it sort of evolved because a couple of months later, I'm pretty sure it was in 2021, similar situation, still no live audiences. In Windsor, Ontario, and I'm also the principal clarinetist there. We did similarly a no audience but streamed program that featured the Coleridge-Taylor nonettes, and I was not familiar with the piece up until that point, but I was really taken with it, and in the similar sort of ways that pieces like the Beethoven Septet and Schubert Octet are really sort of captivating, and that sort of evolved my thoughts of maybe we should be doing this piece too in London. And I'm going to come right back to Andrew and propose that we do this piece. So here we are at long last programming it. And I just couldn't be more delighted.
yeah, I think it was also coincident with the death of George Floyd. And I think we as musicians, we as
Sure.
programmers are thinking, okay, what can we do to recognize Black composers? What can we do to tell a more complete musical history, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And this piece just fits into that so well. What do you hear in this music? Like, do you hear other influences of late romantic composers? What do you hear?
I sure do. And you hit it right on the head there, I think, saying late romantic because of that era, the later part of the 19th century, and we're all surely familiar with other composers of that era. And I would say that Coleridge-Taylor's sort of musical language fits right in with his contemporaries of that time. I know he was a great admirer of composers like Brahms and Dvorak, and you really do hear that sort of musical language, I think, in his music. Um, I don't know if this is a strange way to put it, but if you played this piece for somebody and said, "Oh yeah, this is a nonette by Brahms or Dvorak," I think they'd be fooled. They would believe you.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really has all of those same qualities of great lyricism, great romanticism, and yet extraordinary sort of balance and structure and composition that you might think of with Brahms or Dvorak, but still these beautiful lyric melodies. And I guess it's probably worth noting too, with I alluded earlier to the sort of larger form chamber pieces that aren't just a string quartet or a woodwind quintet or something, but sort of mixing the strings and winds together. I always think really creates a very lush sound, a very full sort of orchestration, but
Hmm.
albeit still in the chamber music genre. And those pieces I alluded to earlier by composers like Beethoven and Schubert really succeed in that way too. So I think those are some of the reasons why we love to play this music. And yeah, I just think it really suits our ensemble
Yeah.
perfectly.
I hadn't thought of that actually. It's kind of like you've got these hints of when there first of all, there's definitely a sense of occasion when you do these larger chamber works
Sure.
and then it's like you get these hints of definitely an orchestral sound because you've got your, principal string players and your principal wind players. But then
Hmm.
there's all that intimacy, right, that chamber music brings and then, for the audience just being able to kind of see the level of communication around the semicircle is it's special. It's really special.
Really is.
And that you get a real sense of occasion when the Schubert octet is performed and Beethoven septet. And I think that's much the same with this nonet. It's very interesting that he adds a piano in, whereas those other two works didn't have the piano. That's quite notable.
That's
Uh,
true, yeah. And again, it sort of helps to expand the sound and the sort of lush sonorities. Of course, with adding the piano, definitely.
yeah, it sounds huge. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
And so. Another piece that's on the program, in addition to the nonet, we've taken one of the movements from his clarinet quintet,
yeah.
the gorgeous Larghetto Affettuoso. It brings to my mind this special ability of the clarinet, and of course you're totally unbiased.
No, of course, yeah.
Uniting the registers of the strings from low to high. Um, so why do you feel like the clarinet succeeds at that? And don't be shy.
Well, yeah, with no bias whatsoever, of course. I think of some of again the pillars of chamber music for my instruments. Definitely with that instrumentation with clarinet and string quartet, there are some magical pieces that have been written by Brahms, Mozart, and Weber, and they really, as I say, they've been cornerstones of our repertoire for so long since their inception. There's a certain kind of again sonority that without being tooting my horn too much about the clarinet and its capacity, to play very low and very high with all kinds of different colors, but oftentimes with sort of a mellow tone, especially in slow movements of, those pieces I mentioned by, say, Brahms and Mozart that are just magical. And just exactly in the same way, the Coleridge-Taylor quintet, the slow movement, is just absolutely so gorgeous, but it creates this real sort of sonic world of, I don't know, serenity just and beauty. And perhaps with the fact that clarinetists, tend not to use vibrato in the same way that many other wind instruments use. Um, for whatever reason, it's a little bit mystical, I suppose, but somehow that all blends together really beautifully. And I think it gives the composer a lot of options to, voice it the way that they want. There's definitely moments in the Brahms quintet, for instance, where the clarinet is in the middle of the range. Maybe the violins are playing on top while the clarinet is playing melodic material, but you can sort of pass it off from one to the other. And if you choose to put the clarinet at the top while it's playing melodic material, that works too. Or if you want to have the clarinet playing an accompanying part while the first violin perhaps is playing the melody on top, again, that works too. And the clarinet doesn't really stick out too much. So it just really opens up a whole world of yeah, sonic possibilities, I guess. With
So you can always hear the clarinet in this combination in a quintet with a string quartet, and that's really neat. But then you in particular, Graham Lord can play so quietly, whisper quiet the way, and we're playing also tasto and just floating on the string, and you have the
Right.
ability to blend, and that's super cool. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Mozart too. In his slow movements, the strings are asked to be muted, and then the clarinet plays a beautiful sort of opera aria style thing on top. But again, in a very soft dynamic, and that just melds together so beautifully. And yeah, this it really creates a lot of options for the composer.
Yeah, and these both of these works were written when he was pretty young, right? So like
Yeah.
the non-ed is an opus 2. And
Yes.
so in terms of, naming his catalog, it's super early. He was maybe
It,
a late teenager. Like,
I believe so. I think he was studying at the Royal College of Music in London at the time, and this was, technically a student composition for his studies, which is just remarkable when you think about it, about the maturity of the writing. Um, One piece that often comes to mind for me that it's sort of eye-popping that, this was written by a student, the Shostakovich's First Symphony, for instance, just to name one example, or
yes,
we think of Mozart, the Prodigy, child or something like that, where it's
sure.
like, I cannot believe that such music of such maturity was written by somebody so young. And this Coleridge-Taylor nonet is no different. It's
Yeah.
incredible that he'd absorbed so much musically to produce such a rich piece at such a young age. It's
It
extraordinary.
is extraordinary. Also comes to mind Mendelssohn's string octet.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
That's another good example.
just like off the charts, complexity and joy, and just a whole range of emotion, but it's all there. And
Yeah,
there's no doubt that Coleridge Taylor was an absolute genius. The quintet again was early, right? This is what, Opus 10. So,
sure. Yeah,
I'm guessing that he probably composed this in his early 20s.
I
Um,
believe so.
Bra
Yeah.
and Brahms didn't hit his clarinet quintet until quite late. Was it
No,
this?
it was right towards the end of his life. And actually, as a clarinetist, I can mention a lot of our big pieces. We're very fortunate that a lot of extraordinary composers wrote sort of their, masterpieces for the clarinet, or just, the main uh, uh, pieces, concertos, sonatas, or chamber music, really right towards the end of their life or career. I even many moons ago did a solo recital with a lot of different sonatas, and I think I called it Famous Last Words. And it was kind of like, if not the very last opus for these composers, um, Mozart with his clarinet concerto, the Brahms quintet or the trio or his clarinet sonatas, Poulenc, Saint-Saëns, the list goes on and on and on. Again, with no bias whatsoever. I wonder if composers, as they were sort of in the autumnal part of their life, sort of realized or discovered something magical about what works for the clarinet. And so we're very lucky that that's sort of the way it is. But here we are with Coleridge-Taylor writing such incredibly mature music at the beginning of his compositional life.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. Well, thanks very much for joining me today, Graham. I look forward to performing this program with you. And then on to Roy Lewis. So thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Andrew. Looking forward to it a lot.
And now we welcome Roy Lewis, who is the writer and actor of this concert, The Life and Troubled Times of Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Welcome, Roy.
It's nice to be here. This has
So,
been, this really has been an amazing adventure.
mm, I agree. I agree. And I'm so pleased that you've agreed to be part of this concert. I think what you've created, along with the music, it's almost like a new art form. That's how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never participated in anything quite like this. So I asked you to imagine yourself in this concert because I know that in addition to being a terrific actor of both the stage and the screen, you are a writer of amazing poetry, and you've it's Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Well, actually, before we get to him, I think that you've worked previously on works of theater
Mm-hmm.
that involve a huge musical component. I'm thinking of the play that you worked on with our principal cellist Ben Bolt Martin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was during the pandemic. Um, I wanted to write a piece for a new company, the Here for Now company, and wrote a piece about a relationship that was falling apart. And it was written in prose, poetic prose,
Hmm.
and straight poetry. and Ben put those pieces to music.
Hmm.
It was a really great time. It was a really great time. I think people really liked what we did. I had never seen so many. At the end of the show, people lined up to come and talk to us after the show. Men were crying in the house. I never experienced that before. But the my poetry, Ben's music, really struck a chord with uh, with all the audiences that saw the piece.
And so with this concert, there's not original music being created. There are a couple of original arrangements by Scott Good, but it's largely music by Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and other musical identities
Mm-hmm.
that form part of this concert play. So, when we think back to when I first mentioned this to you, I really didn't know whether you would be telling the story of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor as just straight up narration, or bringing your poetry to it, or acting his role in some kind of way. So is he a composer that you had heard of before?
I had never heard of him before. I literally had to do research to find out who he was. I wasn't aware of I wasn't aware of the piece of brought him to fame. I mean, Hiawatha. I mean, I knew the Longfellow poem, sort of knew the Longfellow poem, but I had no idea that Coleridge Taylor had set it to music. I mean, it brought him incredible fame.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it literally put him on that literally put him on the musical map. Uh, it's interesting though. He had a series of angels that really supported him. Edward Elgar, who was the great Edward Elgar was a mentor to him. His music publisher August Jaeger helped promote his work and pushed him forward. His grandfather heard saw the musical gifts that that his grandson had and paid for his musical education pretty much all through that early part of his life. Um, and then, of course, when he got to school, and we're talking about like the Royal Academy of Music, his his music teacher that taught him composition, Charles Villiers Stanford, was also a great angel to him, propelling him and his career forwards.
Oh, so as you were discovering more and more and more about his, it's really a remarkable life.
Absolutely.
Um, what I remember one of our early conversations, it was like, wow, he's at the crossroads of all this different stuff.
Yeah.
It's like he's the Flashman character in the comics, which I was unfamiliar with. Tell us about Flashman.
George MacDonald Fraser, novelist, created this character called Flashman. Um, and basically, Flashman has a series of adventures in the 19th century, and he meets all of these amazing figures in history, and Flashman sort of intersects with them, and great adventures happen. And in a way, that's what we were sort of suggesting should happen to Samuel Coleridge Taylor, that same kind of thing, because all sorts of events happen around his life. Grant. I mean, in 1912, the Titanic sinks, and you have the coal miners strike in Britain. I mean,
Yeah.
um, you're almost heading towards World War. You're almost heading towards World War One. I mean, all sorts of things sort of happen, and we thought it might be interesting to sort of to have him sort of in his journey be aware of those things. We could mention those things.
Yes. Yes. And he wasn't just a bystander, just kind of, watching this all go by. He was right in there. His Song of Hiawatha
Mm-hmm.
is something that we cannot perform as part of this concert because it like involves a whole orchestra,
Uh,
chorus, a bevy of soloists. But this piece that we never hear nowadays, it was
mm-hmm.
performed pretty much straight, for 50 years, hugely famous.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Outshining Handel's Messiah
Hmm.
multiple occasions, fully staged
Hmm.
after Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's death, like a big theatrical extravaganza at Albert Hall. They'd be sold out 2 week runs of the thing. It sold 140,000 choral scores even before World War One. Now, this could make a man's fortune, a singular work like this, but it wasn't to be for Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, right?
No, he had no money and he sold the rights
Mm-hmm.
because that was basically it. He had to make ends meet. He had to put food on the table. So that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Now he sold the rights to that, but he kept the rights to other things and was able to make money. But at the time of his death, he had really very little.
Mm-hmm.
He had really very little. Um, that was part of the adventure of his life. You could call it that. Yeah.
Tell me about his family. So he was of mixed race parentage.
Yes.
His father.
His father was a student of medicine in London. That's where he met his mother. And but the relationship with his mother, David and Alice's relationship, didn't last. He finished his studies and returned to Africa, and Coleridge-Taylor was raised by Alice's family. And it's interesting because it was a family of musicians. They all sort of had these musical skills, and but the kid was brilliant. And once the grandfather saw that, he did everything he could to support his development as a musician.
Mm-hmm. And so he was sort of estranged from his father. Didn't I don't know if he met him. Did he ever meet him?
I don't think he ever met him. I mean, he knew where his father was because his family had told him where his father was. He knew that his father was living in Gambia. He knew that his father was a coroner, but that was pretty much all that he knew. And I suppose he, but I suppose he spent his life wondering. He spent his life wondering about who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's interesting, Coleridge Taylor had a great love for African culture. And when he went to the United States on the three tours that he was on, he did everything he could to connect to the African community, the African intellectual community in the United States, and became a part of the discussion of what an American national music could be. When Dvorak was in the United States, he had that discussion as well with a guy named Harry Burley. They talk about this stuff all the time about what an American national music could be. And Dvorak said, "Well, it's obvious what it needs to be. You've got Black American music, you've got spirituals, you've got Aboriginal music. Surely, a national music should have its roots in that." But anyway,
And you hear that in like his Ninth Symphony, from the New World,
mm, mm,
clearly,
mm, mm,
clearly.
mm, mm,
And even from, an early compositional age, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was inserting that into his music. You hear African themes in
mm,
his
mm,
clarinet quintet. You
mm.
hear it in the nonet. These are spectacular compositions that were composed when he was a very young man. And
Yeah, yeah,
he died young too, right?
he did. He
Mhm.
did. I think he's. I think he. I think he's like 36. I think he's 36 when he dies. He's a young man.
Mhm.
He dies of pneumonia. He's waiting for a train. Maybe I shouldn't spoil that. Maybe we should wait until see the see the show itself and wait for that piece of storytelling. But he does die
We'll
of
double
pneumonia.
back
Yeah,
that.
but he does die of pneumonia.
Hmm.
Yeah, at a very young age.
Very tragic. So as you were digging and as you were writing, it turns out that a lot what forms a large part of the text in this show is in the
Mhm.
form of diary entries. So can you just take us through that process? So you're doing research, writing a
Yeah.
little bit here, you're writing a little bit there, third person, first person. Just take us through how it evolved.
All of my writing starts with a poem. It all starts with a poem, and it develops from there, and that's how this piece started as well. That I was writing little bits of, I was making discoveries about Samuel Coleridge-Taylor and turning those discoveries into poetry, and it was third person, but it slowly morphed into first person, and once that happened, um, the diary entries appeared
Mhm.
and the letters to friends appeared. And once I'd gotten onto that track, then the writing sort of just flowed.
And when we say that these things appeared, you mean that it's like they, based on history, based on fact, you started to generate these imagined correspondences,
Yes,
um,
yes,
whether it's newspaper reports or whatever of this great new composer on the scene,
yes.
letters of support from, well, just tell me some of the luminaries, the famous people that we will hear.
Some of these people, newspaper art, you can newspaper articles exist. I mean, you can find these things online. I just I just embellished them. I embellished the things that I discovered, the pieces of history. The pieces of history are true. They're real facts that happened. But I just enriched the discoveries that I found. And so when he is invited to the White House, I created the scene for the invitation. Did diplomats go to Coleridge Taylor's hotel and give him the invitation by hand? Well, they do in our work. Whether or not that actually happened in history is another story altogether. But the fact of the matter is, he was invited to the White House.
Yeah.
He did. He did do a concert at the White House for Teddy Roosevelt and his wife Edith.
Mhm.
Um, so the whole piece is sort of like that. It is a gentle collision of fact and fiction, a delightful collision of fact and fiction in poetic prose.
I love it. And when I've been reading, I mean, we're still working, working on the script a little bit together,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it is just such gorgeous poetry. And then there's these diary entries and these thoughts that is it all poetry to you? Do you favor some of it more than others? And
Yeah, to me it is all. To me, the whole piece is poetry. It's prose poems and straight poetry. It's all poetry to me.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can imagine that I mean, unbeknownst to our audience, there are decisions that need to be made. You are so prolific with your writing. It's not like I've had to say to you, "Oh, Roy, we need something more written here. Oh, this is a little bit light here. We need something more here. We need more context here." Like it's not really like that. You wrote a large volume of material, and we've had to make decisions in order to exact this kind of perfect balance between
Mm-hmm.
concert
Mm-hmm.
and theater production. At this
Mm-hmm.
stage of the game, and still underway, do you think this is more concert or more, more theater, or is it perfect, and maybe there's a future iteration where it's more theater than concert. Who knows?
Right now I think it's a lovely balance of both. But in my heart of hearts, I'd like to push it more towards more of a play than a concert. It's not that the music shouldn't be there; the music has to be there because we are talking about the life of a great musician. The music has to be there, but I'd like it to sort of to have more of a theatrical weight than a musical weight. But right now, I think we have a lovely balance,
Mhm.
and I completely understand the need to take out pieces of the writing in order to give more focus to the music. I mean, it has to happen. I mean, I knew this was going to happen going in, but in my heart of hearts, I do look to that day when you and I, Andrew, will
Yes.
create this theatrical piece.
Yes, I hear you. But what we're going to give people on the night of February 22nd is complete movements of music, not
Absolutely.
just a little hint or a whiff of something, and then we move on to the next scene.
Mm-hmm.
Complete movements of music. We've got the entire nonet,
Mm-hmm.
but we've taken it into chunks.
Mm-hmm.
So the four movements are separated, and then there's this, luminous poetry that intersperses. One movement from his clarinet quintet. Um, I'm so looking forward to this concert, Roy. I'm really, really grateful for what you've brought to it. And just your unique voice and commitment to creating something that's just going to absolutely leap off the stage. So thank you so much for joining me today for this chat.
This has been a really exciting adventure for me. It really, really has been. Um, I I'm really grateful for it. So
Wonderful.
that
Thank you. Okay. Until later.